Hey everybody, Shelby Young here from Hampshire Hills Athletic Club and Shelby Young Fitness, starting our number 3 in the live nutrition discussion and education series. If I sound a little bit out of breath, I just did a 100 push-up challenge that'll be posting soon. So if you want to give that a shot, feel free to give it a go. Let me know how you do. All right, we got 5 viewers right away. Hope everybody's doing well today, staying safe, staying healthy. So let's get the disclaimer out of the way. Again, I am not a medical doctor. Any significant changes to your diet and exercise routine should be checked with a healthcare professional first. That would be your general care practitioner, a registered dietitian, somebody along those lines, somebody that's familiar with you and your specific health concerns. Hey, Tammy. Uh, so, especially if you have a medical condition that could be exacerbated by diet, then definitely make sure that you check with your general care practitioner or a registered dietitian before undertaking any significant dietary changes. So we're going to be talking a lot about general nutrition and health advice, and there is a fun little exercise slash drinking game going on right now. That anytime I say or that you can either take a drink or do 5 push-ups. Once again, you do either of those at your own risk. Chances are you'll get through the 100 push-ups very quickly with this because I tend to say and a lot, but we're going to be talking a lot today about understanding where you are within the stages of change. They call this the Transtheoretical Model, and it's basically figuring out how close you are to being able to make a significant change to your health, diet, exercise, basically taking on any habit that would be of good benefit to you. So it starts off with pre-contemplative. So when you are pre-contemplative, it means exactly what it sounds like. You're not even really contemplating it yet. You might have a vague idea of something like, oh, hey, I heard about this diet, or, I've seen this exercise routine advertised, or things like that, where you're in the very early, the nascent stages of beginning. Once you begin to start significantly thinking more about it, then you're in the contemplative stage. You've thought about it on a regular basis of making some healthy, positive changes. Maybe you've talked to a few people about it. So it's now become much more of a solid concept to you. It's not just like a vague inkling in the back of your mind that now it's like it's kind of moving more to the forefront of your brain. It's something that you're really considering doing. So that's contemplative. Once you actually start to take steps towards moving in that direction, then you're into preparatory phase. So let's say you bought a healthy eating cookbook. You started to download and save some of those good recipes online. You've maybe purchased some exercise equipment that you have in your house. I know a lot of us, buy exercise equipment with the best intentions. Maybe it gets used a couple times, then it winds up as a coat rack. So you purchased it. That's preparation. Until you actually make use of it, you're not in the action phase yet. Hey, Heather. So you've got pre-contemplative, contemplative, preparatory, and then we move into action. So now you're starting to make those healthy meals. You're starting to work out once in a while. You're, making healthier choices in general. So that's action. And you can be in action for anywhere from the first day up to usually 6 weeks, 3 months. It varies a lot depending on who you talk to. Once you've gone past that 6 week, 3 month phase, then you're in maintenance. And if you'll notice, like 6 weeks is usually longer than most diet plans that you see advertised out there. And there's a reason for that people want quick fixes. And I try to do my best to steer people away from things that are quick fixes. However, making small goals and little milestones to help you get going, to help snowball that momentum, those are good things to do. Because when someone's like, okay, so like this healthy eating and exercise thing, so like, I'm going to do that till I lose 10 pounds. We talked about this a little bit last week. It's like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, then everything's going to be fine. It's not really how it works. And it can be a little bit overwhelming. It's like, so how long am I going to do this for? And like, well, the rest of your life. So however long you plan to live, that's how long you're going to be eating healthy and exercising for. If you want those later years, especially, to have good quality of life, then you want to try to make as many good choices throughout your day as possible. Once again, you don't have to be 100% perfect. You don't have to live like a monk and only eat organic fruits and vegetables and wild caught fish that you caught yourself, and drinking purified rainwater, and avoiding looking at your phone screen or anything like that. But in order to be successful, you have to make far more good choices than bad. So if you think of it like a teeter-totter scale, over here is the fruits and vegetables and healthy lean proteins and healthy fat sources. Hey, Sue. And over here is Ben and Jerry's and Netflix binges and that kind of stuff, which I know we're all binging Netflix right now for the most part. Let me know if you're watching anything good. Go ahead and mention it down in the comments, because I think I've just about finished this one. Just kidding. There's so much more. I'm doing my best to be up and moving as much as possible. Like I said, luckily I'm able to come in here and do cleaning and office work and do things that get me out of the house. If you are not in that kind of situation where you are not considered an essential worker and you're stuck sitting at home a little bit more, try to go out. Obviously maintain social distances, but try to get some of that vitamin D on a day that's not like today. We had a few really nice days, and then yesterday and today have been kind of poopy. But yeah, still get out, get some fresh air, walk around. If you have to put your mask on, go right ahead and do that. Keep that 6 feet distance from people, but try to get out, try to get moving as much as you can. We've got a lot of really good live offerings here. We also have the Les Mills library that you can access through the Hampshire Hills Facebook page. You can also check out, I have a YouTube channel that's got a ton of extraction. Oh, the Chris Hemsworth one. Thanks, Brian. I'll check that out. My YouTube page has about 600 different videos on it, mostly of individual exercises, some short routines, but basically just a lot of different progressions and regressions of things you can do. So we talked about the stages of change, where you've got pre-contemplative, contemplative, preparatory, action. Hey, Alex. Hey, Amy. So action and then maintenance. So after maintenance, unfortunately, a lot of times comes relapse, which is where you've been doing really well for a while. You've gotten in past that 6 week to 3 month phase, where now it's no longer just something that you're doing temporarily, that now, healthy eating, exercising, and this can be anything. This can be doing yoga, it can be meditation, deep breathing exercises, daily stretching, doing some body weight calisthenics. Hey, honey barb. Whatever it is that you're doing to keep yourself healthy and fit and moving and eating well and fueling your body properly, that's now become just part of your daily life. But it is very easy to slide backwards. Now, once again, I don't expect anyone to be 100% just on it, that you're never going to cheat, you're never going to slip at all. That's just really not realistic. But the problem is if it starts to snowball in the other direction. Now you go, oh yeah, I'm going to have my cheat meal on Saturday night, and I'm going to go out for pizza. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to have a couple glasses of wine with that. Okay, fine. And then, I'm going to have ice cream and French fries with that. Now it's starting to balloon a little bit more. You've gone past being just a cheat meal to now it's a cheat day to a cheat weekend. And then next thing you know, you're kind of right back where you started. So that can definitely be a problem. So you want to make sure that you're stacking as many good choices in your direction as possible. And if you find that you're really struggling, reach out to someone like myself or another health and fitness professional that you trust, and we'll be happy to help keep you on track. And at the very least, you'll be accountable to somebody. So I talked about making little changes, little short-term goals. They call those SMART goals, which is it's an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and it has a timetable to it. So if you apply each of those criteria to whatever goal you're going to make, it makes it a little bit easier to accomplish it. That if you're like, I'm going to get fit, that's a very broad, nebulous term. And it's actually, when we do our fitness assessments here, which we do with all of our new clients, terms that I don't really like is, I just want to get fit. Okay. That's like you telling me that you like the color of the sky. It's very vague. It doesn't really help me understand where you are and where you're looking to go. The more specific that you can be with your goals, the easier it is to attain them. So when it's something that's measurable, so that's something that has a numerical value attached to it, says, I want to lose 5 pounds. Okay, now we've got something that's specific and it's measurable. Now, is it attainable? Losing 5 pounds in what kind of a timetable? 5 pounds in 2 months. Totally doable. 10 pounds by next week? Probably not. So it's, once again, kind of dialing those things down. Same thing. Realistic and attainable are a lot of times interchangeable with that. And then the timetable is, once again, is what's the time constraints that you're going to put on it. Because if you don't put any kind of a timetable on it, if you don't have milestones that you're looking to get to within a certain amount of time, then again, it can kind of be something that just goes out forever. Macro tracking can be very useful. I still will hang my hat that I think food quality matters first over quantity, within reason. So this is where I've talked a little bit about the IIFYM, the if it fits your macros kind of crowd. Started off with a really good idea that if you took your overall calories into account, which we talked about that a little bit last time, that based on your current size and what your level of body leanness and the goal of either gaining or losing weight, whatever it is you're trying to get to, you can figure out how many calories you're supposed to be taking in per day. And from there, you can start to partition that up into how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbohydrates, and how many grams of fat you're supposed to take in. Because keep in mind, 4 calories per gram for both protein and carbohydrates, and 9 calories per gram of fat. So usually, and that's totally fine. That's a good way to kind of break things up. And you can find different calculators online. The problem is that for some people, it's not quite specific and descriptive enough. For some people that don't like to be really in a regimented kind of state, that they're good at sort of freewheeling it and being able to figure out where they need to go from there, sure, that can be fine. What tends to happen though is if you just give people a macro ratio to hit and don't tell them about kind of the quality of the foods really do matter as far as from a micronutrient standpoint, vitamins, minerals, keeping your sugar content low, not eating trans fats like we talked about last week, not eating too much saturated fat, things like that, then things can kind of go off the rails. Barry Sears, who was the author of the Zone Diet, which was really big for a while, his magical macro ratio for everybody was 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat. That as long as you ate within that ratio, you could eat whatever you wanted. Didn't matter. Somebody once asked him, which would you think is going to be more beneficial? Unlimited eating of all healthy foods, or partitioning up things like fried chicken and ding dongs? And he actually jumped the shark a little bit and said that he would rather people ate the partitioned fried chicken and ding dongs than just eating as much as they wanted of all healthy foods. And that, to me, that just rings of somebody trying to sell you something. And sometimes you hear this described as flexible eating is another way that people will describe this, that you can eat whatever you want as long as it's within the macronutrient ratios. And I just don't feel like you can partition up crappy food and still maximize your health and nutrition benefits. It's not eating like an adult is one way that I've heard it put. That if you're going to, you'll still see this among the bulk and cut crowds and things like that. People are like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of that insulin sensitivity spike that I get after my workout. I'm gonna down just like 3 bowls of Cinnamon Toast Crunch because it fits my macros, and that's when I'm gonna stack most of my carbs. If you're trying to eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch and calling it a health food, things have gone wrong long before we reach that point. So just be realistic with yourself. Eat like an adult. The majority, we talked about this last time, of using your hand to kind of figure out your macronutrients is one way to go about it. So for those of you that didn't watch last week, once again, protein for men, and it's going to be palm sized and thickness. So 1.5 to 2 palms of protein. We're going to do, for our vegetables, you want to be the size of your fist. So once again, 1.5 to 2 fist size for men, 1 to 1.5 for women. So it's usually going to be 25 to 50% less for women, because women tend to be smaller than men. So once again, this is all just a starting point. You can adjust from here. You want hand cup size of carbohydrates per meal. So 1.5 to 2 for men, 1 to 1.5 for women, and then a thumb size of fat. So again, 1.5 to 2 for men, 1 to 1.5 for women. So that is kind of a quick and dirty way to start your macronutrient partitioning. If you're somebody who likes to track grams, if you're a little bit more numbers oriented, usually what we'll do is we kind of start with protein, because that's what the majority of the studies that we look at when, like, whether it's intermittent fasting, low carb, high carb, a lot of different things like that, when you account for making sure that people are eating the right number of calories and eating the right amount of protein, the other stuff kind of comes out in the wash, that it's a little bit less important. So we'll usually start with how much protein does this person need? And this varies a lot. You will hear some people put hard numbers on things. 80 grams was a number that was floated around for a while, that the human body couldn't absorb more than 80 grams of protein in a day. And that's just kind of an asinine, arbitrary number. That, you know, you have somebody like my girlfriend's fairly petite. She's a very small woman, trying to say that her body will absorb 80 grams, and then my buddy Rich, who's like 6'7" and 240 pounds of muscle, that they need the same, that his body will only also absorb 80 grams. It's kind of ridiculous when you start to look at things like that. So usually what we'll do is we'll say, if you're trying to maintain your current weight, you're going to have a gram of protein per pound of lean body weight. So again, you want to get your body fat measured either using skin-fold calipers, a biometric impedance unit, whether it's the hands or the scales, or we have a little bit more advanced unit here. You could spend the extra money and do the hydrostatic weighing, the bod pod, the dual X-ray MRI imaging, which is also called a DEXA scan. It's ridiculously expensive. It'll be super accurate, but do you really need it to be that accurate? Probably not. The goal with a lot of this stuff is to give you a starting point and then adjust from there. So once you've established what your protein requirements are, so if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to gain muscle, you might need a little bit more. So you might bump that, 0.8 or either 1 gram per pound of lean body weight. Maybe you need a little bit less. You can bump that down to like 0.8 grams. Maybe you need more. You can bump it up to 1.5. It's really tough to overeat on protein, mainly for the satiety hormones that get affected by it. There's some main hormones that tell you that your body is full, and they take about 20 minutes to reach your brain, and those are leptin, ghrelin, and neuropeptide PYY. You can look those up more online if you want some more in-depth work on it, but those are kind of the main three. There's a few more, but those are the signals that go from your stomach to your brain that tell you that you are full, that you don't need to eat any more food. And protein has a pretty heavy effect on all of those. It tends to release them fairly readily. So once you've eaten a lot of protein, you tend to not want to eat a whole lot more food, which is why it's really, really tough to overeat. The other thing that protein has a benefit for is what they call the TEF, the thermic effect of food, which is essentially the amount of calories that are burned in order to digest a certain kind of food. So protein has the highest thermic effect, which means that it varies, once again, depending on the protein source and what else you have with it, but usually it's anywhere from 25 to 40%. So if I eat 100 calories of protein, anywhere from 25 to 40 of those calories are going to go towards the digestion process. So I'm only actually going to absorb 60 to 75 calories of actual protein, which is still a good amount. So you can still overeat it. You can, anytime you eat above what your caloric needs are, doesn't matter if it comes from protein, carbs, or fat, it's going to get stored as body fat. There is no such thing as a food, with the exception of some green veggies where the thermic effect kind of balances out. But there's no free rides. There's no negative calorie foods. I know that like Celsius and some of these other weight loss drinks tried to market that it's like, oh, well, it bumps up your thermogenesis, which is raising the metabolic rate of your body in order to burn more calories than you take in. Oh, the meat sweats. Yeah, right. Yeah. Anybody that's watched that Morgan Spurlock one on Super Size Me, yeah, where he ate nothing but McDonald's foods for 30 days. Yeah, he talked about the McSweats, the meat sweats, which please don't eat just McDonald's for 30 days, for the love of God. I don't know why. It was an interesting experiment, and it is, in statistics we call that an N of 1, N equals 1, which is this is one guy did this one thing, and it doesn't necessarily prove anything. But if somebody had to tell you that eating nothing but McDonald's for 30 days was going to have a negative effect on your body, once again, you haven't really been paying attention. So from there, once we've kind of established what your protein requirements are, then you can start to adjust depending on what your food tolerances are, how well you tolerate different things. And if you have a question about what your food sensitivities are, go to your doctor, go to your nutritionist, your dietitian, and have them run a food sensitivity panel for you. There's some that you can order online that you just kind of swab the inside of your mouth and they'll test it, and based on your DNA and a few other things, they'll determine what your food sensitivities are. Usually it's on a scale of like 1, 2, or 3 of how sensitive, of 0 to 3. So if you're not sensitive to it at all, it'll be a 0. If you're very sensitive to it, then it could be a 3. And we talked a little bit about systemic inflammation last time. So if you're eating a food that you are sensitive to, that you have a high reaction to, then it's going to be causing systemic inflammation throughout your body. And that can be linked to a lot of different things, particularly autoimmune conditions tend to be very affected by systemic inflammation. So things like rheumatoid arthritis, but general arthritis can be as well. So if you're somebody who is like a hard charging, high intensity, Tabata, CrossFit, sprint based kind of person, you're probably going to need more carbohydrates because your body runs on different fuel substrates. So this is going to get a little deep into the physiology, the science side of this stuff. So bear with me for a minute here. But you have 3 different fuel substrates that your body runs on. So you've got phosphocreatine, which is like your fast sprint based, anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds of like super explosive high intensity work. So like Olympic lifting, 100-meter dash, that kind of stuff. That's phosphocreatine. Once you extend out past that 30-second threshold up to about 2 to 5 minutes, you can push the window and people vary on how far they can go with it. Then you're into the glycolytic phase. So glycolytic is only fueled by carbohydrates, by glycogen, which is the body's stored form of glucose, which is blood sugar. Hey, Laura. So if you're somebody who likes to really beat up that glycolytic pathway, like I said, you like the Tabata stuff, you like doing sprint-based work, especially high repetitive sprint-based work with short recovery time in between, and you really kind of thrive on that euphoria you get after being beaten down. Which you got to admit, if you're into that kind of stuff, which I used to be a hardcore CrossFit zealot. If you're into that, then you're slightly masochistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. There was a documentary that came out a little while ago called Rise of the Sufferfests, where they talked about Spartan races and that kind of stuff of how people are looking for challenges, and that you need to be willing to suffer a little bit to really challenge yourself, that moving outside your comfort zone. So once again, phosphocreatine, fast, super intense, explosive sprint-based stuff. A little bit further out, still somewhat explosive, but longer duration is going to be your glycolytic pathway. Once you get past that, then you start to break down into what they call the slow fat oxidative phase. So this would be your longer distance endurance running. Probably anything from like 1 mile onward, you're definitely going to be, depending on how fast you run a mile. You're definitely going to be moving into the slow fat oxidative form. So fat can be broken down as fuel, but your body tends to prefer carbohydrates first, for most of us. Now, you can become what they call fat adapted if you go on the lower carb end of things and tend to... So this is one of the common misconceptions when it comes to things like going low carb or keto or things like that. It isn't, neither one of those is necessarily super high in protein. Your protein requirements are kind of set, and then you just flip-flop. So instead of having your main fuel source be carbohydrates, you switch it over to fat. Now, obviously, you want to get this more from your healthy fat sources, things like avocado, nuts, olives, olive oils. Coconut is one of those things that people are like, it's a saturated fat. It's a medium chain triglyceride, which tends to be less problematic for the saturated fat kind of things. And the body is nowhere near as simple as ingest more saturated fat, and you wind up getting more LDL cholesterol. There's textbooks written on this stuff. Your body has so many different feedback loops built in. Thanks, Kim. I try to be informative. Hopefully I'm not just out here just spouting nonsense, that you guys are actually getting something from this. But if you're somebody who is trying to run really low carb, especially once you first make that transition, people talk about like the low carb flu. That can be due to a few different things. One is that your body isn't used to breaking down fat and processing it as a fuel source. So it's going to take a little bit of time for your body to get used to that. The other main thing is that a lot of times you're not taking in enough electrolytes. That's a really common thing, especially when people go faux keto. And once again, there's a world of difference between ketosis and diabetic ketoacidosis. Diabetic ketoacidosis, which is a true life-threatening condition, generally only affects type 1 diabetics. So if someone tells you that keto is life-threatening because of ketoacidosis, unless you're type 1 diabetic, they're wrong. I say that with a good amount of certainty. There will always be a few outliers on it. Once again, I know a lot of people do really well with keto. I tend to see a lot more people struggle a lot with it as far as for long-term maintenance. Hey, Kim. Thanks for chiming in. So you can also break down protein and have it eventually become carbohydrates. That's a process called gluconeogenesis, which is producing carbohydrates from other fuel substrates. So if you were going to run on a really low carb diet for an extended period of time, you're probably going to notice anything that would be in that kind of glycolytic pathway after a few weeks will start to suffer. So your body will store up glycogen in both your muscle tissue and your liver. So like if you suddenly drop down your carbohydrate intake, you can run off of that stored glycogen for a little while. If you want to keep doing kind of like I said, the Tabata, the CrossFit, the short intense burst, high intensity interval training, that kind of stuff, that's going to tend to run on the glycogen pathway. So if you suddenly cut your carbohydrate intake and then try to increase your high intensity exercise training, it's probably not going to go so well. If you're running really, really low carb, then you're probably going to want to stick towards lifting heavy things and slow, just like walking, bicycling, things that are not going to be jacking your heart rate up super high, things that are keeping you below that second ventilatory threshold, where you're still able to talk. It's if you can recite the Pledge of Allegiance without too much trouble, then you're usually below that ventilatory threshold. So if you want to do like the high intensity explosive stuff, and once again, you will find outliers, examples of people who are able to still do this stuff and do it on a regular basis. That's what Matt Lalonde, who's a Harvard biochemist who I reference quite a bit, really, really smart dude, did a write-up on this a while ago where he tried to go super low carb and do CrossFit. And he was able to actually like make some personal records and really crush it. One is because he's just a beast of an athlete for a little while, and then he bonked. And it's one of he's like looking back on it, he's like, I have no idea why I did this. He actually wound up just in such like a glycogen depleted state that even as had like a health conscious nut as he is, he wound up like dragging himself into a Ben and Jerry's to just binge to try to refuel as much blood sugar or as much glucose as possible to try to get his body back online. So maybe in that way, you could say, oh, well, Ben and Jerry saved my life. But that's going to be pretty rare. So once again, we've already burned the half hour. So we talked a bit today about the Transtheoretical Model of change. So it's subjective. There is some criteria based on like what your current actions are of whether you're in pre-contemplative, where you're not even really thinking about making the change. And maybe it's like on the back burner, like that you should make some positive changes in your life. Contemplative is that now it's kind of a much more recurring thought. It's something you think about on a daily basis. You're like, today's the day. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to start going. I'm going to start. Okay, cool. Preparatory is when you're actually taking the steps. Maybe you ordered new running shoes. Maybe you dug some dumbbells out of the basement. Maybe you've started to schedule those workout times, like I mentioned. Scheduling workout times is huge. That will definitely help you once you actually get into the action phase. So you could stay in contemplative and preparatory for a long time, where you're thinking about it, you're talking about it, maybe take some steps, but until you actually like bite the bullet and get into it, you are not in the action phase. I want you in the action phase. I want you in the maintenance phase. Those are the phases where stuff happens, where good things start to happen. It's when you're making those positive changes and doing the good habits on a daily basis. That's where things are going to start to really be good for you. So we still don't really know exactly when things are going to get back to normal. It could be a while. and you only get one body. And this is something Joe Rogan had talked about a while ago that I love. This idea that your body is this amazing transformative machine, that whatever your body is right now, that as long as you can move, you can improve it. Making my lunch go by faster. Glad I could help, man. Hope you're doing well, Brian. That as long as your body can move, you can improve where you're at. And it doesn't have to be big. Go out for a 10-minute walk. Yeah, bring your umbrella today. Every once in a while, Pavel Satsouin calls this greasing the groove, is that you set something up in your way. Action phase, yeah, Heather. So like I know some people were doing the peeing push-up challenge, where basically that anytime they came out of the bathroom, they had to stop and do 10 push-ups. Great, cool. You might want doing that. You might wind up racking up 40, 50, 60 push-ups a day, depending on how often you go to the restroom. That's totally fine. Pavel talked about like hanging a pull-up bar in between your living room and your kitchen. Make sure you get one of those like solid ones that hooks over the door frame. Don't get one of those twist tension ones. Those things break all the time. If you don't believe me, there's tons of YouTube videos of those things failing horribly. But it's like every time you walk by, do 1 or 2 pull-ups. Same thing. Doesn't start off as much, but it adds up throughout the day. Handstand challenge. Gotta love the handstand challenge. So yeah, maybe every time you walk by the certain spot in your house, you kick up, you hold a handstand for 5-10 seconds, or you work on whatever modification that you need to get closer to these exercises. Use assistance bands to help with the pull-ups, do your push-ups from your knees, put your feet up on the couch to help you work towards your handstands. There's lots of different tutorials. If you guys would like tutorials on how to do some of this stuff, feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to do some videos on that. But greasing the groove, just kind of accumulating activity throughout the day. You set your time. I know a lot of the smartwatches have this little built-in alarm, which is probably dinging for a lot of you right now, whereas you've been sitting for too long. It's time to get up and move. Cool. Get up, do 20 jumping jacks. Do something light. Start easy. Start with these goals that are so small that you can't possibly fail. SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and on a timetable. That will help you get into action. That will help you get into maintenance. And if you should happen to relapse, it's not the end of the world. Don't take this as, oh, I screwed up, I should just give up completely. No, get back on that bike. Please, the exercise bike. Or, if you're going out and biking outside, be careful. Drivers in New Hampshire kind of suck. They don't tend to give you a whole lot of room on the shoulder. So be careful. But please, get moving, get eating healthy. If you need help, I am here. I will be back next week at 1 o'clock, and I'll be happy to answer any more questions as we go. Hopefully you guys found this informative. Eric, I know that you asked about vegetarianism. I will try to touch on that more next week. But in the meantime, hope you all stay safe, fit, and healthy, and I will see you all then. Later.